Pardon? So, hello all. I'm Marty Block. A good friend of Tim's. I've travelled from Melbourne to be here, and it's fabulous enjoying the warm weather compared to Melbourne's cold, wet weather the last week. Just housekeeping, just a reminder, can everyone please turn off your mobile phones, because tonight we're live streaming around Australia, and tonight we plan to finish 7:30 sharp. So I'd like to acknowledge this book launch. I would like to acknowledge this book launch is being held on the traditional lands of the Arunda people, and pay my respect to elders both past, present and emerging, and who may be here today. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all. I feel absolutely delighted that Tim has invited me to MC tonight and be at his and Dale's book launch. Tonight we've congregated in the majestic Olive Pink Botanic Gardens. That's a 16-hectare botanic native garden located in the heart of Alice Springs, which is the third largest town in the Northern Territory of Australia. I met Tim back in 2006, where we studied social work together in Melbourne as mature age students. From the first day we met, we developed a close relationship and based on similar core beliefs, values and life interests. We're passionate about outdoor adventure, travel, and have both experienced fascinating and varied social work careers. Also, we're both diehard Melbourne supporters. In 2007, I encouraged Tim to consider travelling to Central Australia instead of overseas to complete his final third month. It's a 3-month social work student placement. Fortunately, he listened to some sound advice, where his placement was based here in Alice Springs, and he consequently met Carolyn, and the rest is history. Since Tim commenced his narrative therapy studies in 2012, we've enjoyed many conversations around his narrative therapy ideas, interests and practices. Subsequently, I first met Dale in 2018 after I proposed they be the keynote speakers at a Melbourne-based social work conference that I was organising for 100 mental health social workers. Once again, they both jumped at the opportunity, which set a new benchmark, where Dale presented examples of his childhood sexual abuse and lived experience to a large group of health professionals, which in Melbourne, that's really unusual. During the Q&A session, one of the social workers sincerely thanked Dale for exposing his story, which was laden in guilt, shame and lifelong pain. And this was as a strategy to raise public awareness to challenge many dominant social and political discourses around childhood sexual abuse. Over the last 4 years, Tim and Dale have presented multiple training workshops at several Australian conferences, also doing an international narrative therapy collective interview, and they're currently creating a webinar series for health practitioners, which is long overdue. Today they've formalised their learning and experiences in this book, which is part of the launch tonight. It's important to declare that tonight we'll be talking about the impact of childhood sexual abuse. While this story is a narrative of redemption, we understand it has the potential to trigger personal pain and anxieties. If you are affected by what is shared tonight, please know that we're available to talk after the book launch. Also, assistance is available via 1-800-RESPECT and the Alice Springs Sexual Assault Referral Centre. Also, I've got here some printouts of Australian crisis services for anyone joining us tonight. Or if you're joining us online within Australia or even abroad, please contact your local crisis service. Alternatively, please contact Tim and Dale via their email, which is understandingshame@gmail.com. Okay, so Tim and Dale's book takes an innovative approach to using narrative therapy in counselling people who've been subject to childhood sexual abuse. This book, Reclaiming Lives from Sexual Violence, presents an illustrative case study of the authors, where Tim's the therapist in consultation, with Dale being the client, who was sexually abused as a child by a clergy member. The book is unique in documenting their therapeutic work using transcripts taken directly from their multiple sessions together, and I believe it was 52 sessions over multiple years. This narrative approach invites the reader to consider different ways of engaging in therapy in order to challenge the dominant social discourses around masculinity and shame, looking at shame from a position of value awareness rather than a deficit perspective. This book extends counselling to consider the individual experience as political and one that must be shared outside the one-to-one therapy environment. Also, this book will be an essential resource to new or established therapists and practitioners working with clients who have been victims of sexual violence. Just a bit of background: Tim's a registered mental health social worker and experienced practitioner who's very passionate about assisting people in living their lives in their preferred way. Tim has graduate qualifications in social work and narrative therapy, and he is committed to a person-centred style of practice in supporting individuals, families and groups who have experienced active oppressions. Dale is a survivor of childhood sexual violence and has devoted his life to pastoral care and advocacy, working with the lonely, homeless and drug-affected people. Dale hopes his story brings freedom to other survivors through gaining a deeper understanding of shame and teaching mental health professionals like me that showing care and compassion is a vital component of effective counselling. To give some further context to the book, Tim and Dale's future work together, we'll now watch a pre-recorded interview with Peggy Sachs from her reauthoring teaching in Vermont, New South, in America, who's interviewing Tim and Dale about their book. This will be followed by a pre-recorded testimony from David Newman, who works at Sydney Narrative Therapy, New South Wales. So please enjoy.
Hi everybody, so great to see all your faces. Thanks for joining us today.
So, Tim and Dale, what's brought you to this therapeutic alliance between you?
I was sexually abused as an 11-year-old by a local Catholic priest, and 42 years later I went through a court process and met Tim in the middle of that, which has been, it's changed my life. I was new to sexual assault, which is going back about 7 or 8 years now. The idea around sexual abuse and the silencing nature of it, I was always curious about whose shame was it, and challenging that idea where our conversations quickly became political, didn't they, Dale? And now, I guess 7 years later, we're publishing a book. But also we're sort of having workshops around the parallels in vulnerability between the practitioner and the person we're consulting with. Yes, for me, my experience of having counselling and being a psychologist through the years, I've been treated dreadfully. So that when I met Tim, I was just he was totally different to anyone else I had seen before, and he was probably as vulnerable as I was. I was afraid of men. But I'd always craved male friendship, and never really trusted any men before, besides my brothers and father. So meeting him, he just made me feel relaxed, and he didn't judge me like everyone else had.
And so the picture I'm getting is that you were, because of this sense of feeling supported and seen and not judged by Tim, you were able then to move toward the shame in a different kind of way. And do you mind sharing some of what you each discovered there in that walk? Because that can be very difficult.
That's where the value of externalising it really came into it, wasn't it? It was about the perpetrator, my different perpetrator. And I thought, why would you be asking me that? and I had a flashback on the way home, and I just started to see the differences between the perpetrator and myself. I realised why Tim had asked me that question, and I started to see my innocence, and there was just so much that happened from that question, that one question.
You in our earlier conversations and from reading your book manuscript, you also talk about fighting for justice and with freedom. So how can you take us on that journey a bit?
I think that picture of justice on the cover is just justices like the fist fighting into the balloon that I keep bouncing back. I'm with the Catholic Church, and I can't get that justice. So the fight is still on for justice. That was where we commenced getting letters that were written from other narrative therapy books. People who had experienced sexual abuse, where we write letters to them, wouldn't we? You give me a whiteboard, and we sharing a note taking through sessions, and then Tim would always send me take a photo of the whiteboard and send it to me via email, and new set of questions for next time. How fantastic that was for me to have things that I hadn't even uttered to myself written down on the whiteboard. That's incredible, really. Painful information, but it's freeing as well. It wasn't just stuck inside of me anymore.
Thank you so much, Tim and Dale, and everybody who joined us. Great to see you, and look forward to seeing you next month.
Hello everyone, my name is David Newman. I'm joining you from Gadigal country in a suburb called Coogee, which is a Darug word meaning stinky place, because there's a lot of seaweed that goes on the beach here. I'm very honoured to have been asked to offer some words in this launch of this remarkable book by Dale Johns and Tim Donovan. I have also been honoured to be invited to write a foreword. And I thought the best way for me to get across my very supportive sentiment for this book is to reread my foreword. So that's what I thought I would do. And here we go. So Dale Johns and Tim Donovan approached me to write this foreword, and I'm deeply appreciative. I first met Tim after he asked me to speak with him about his work as a school counsellor. I immediately experienced a flow of warmth, sensitivity, and attentiveness, which made our conversations a joy. And although I briefly met Dale once before reading this book, I've got to know something of his dignified story through the bold and precious words in this book. After reading their remarkable book, my mind's alive with images and life-offering phrases. I think of Dale's reflection. I think for me, freedom is found in sharing the truth and its outcomes. Such a sentiment reminds me of how remarkable an act of reclamation it is to even speak the horrors of child sexual abuse, and this book is a powerful expression of such speaking. I reflect on Robert Miller's personal testimony and his chilling comment as he and Dale were to start their connection with St Mary's Recreational Boys Group. How could we have known the danger we were in? In his testimony, I bear witness to enduring friendship and a shared hope for healing for those who have experienced childhood sexual abuse and trauma. On every page, I am greeted with knowledge that is born out of a gentle and persistent partnership between Dale and Tim, of walking alongside each other. Knowledge Dale contributed to Tim of giving voice and clarity to his preferred way to work, and where Tim contributed to Dale a space where he was believed with no judgment, and where Dale was led in the direction of his truth, as Tim worked gently, asking the right questions. And on every page, I witness an intricate and delicate therapeutic approach being elaborated. This is an approach of respect and experimentation, accompanying great clarity in the use of narrative practices. It is also accompanied by Tim's warm invitations for the reader to reflect on our own practice, where we might find echoes of his deeply considered exploration. And where I am moved to use so many of the practices being articulated, perhaps starting with Tim's innovation in using David Denver's signs of social and psychological resistance in working with trauma and abuse. I'm also greeted with images of some of the fairly recent history of the heartbreaking and beautiful work within these pages. While reading this book, my mind was cast back to my days as a young social worker in the early to mid-1990s. I was co-facilitating groups for male survivors of sexual assault, along with a co-facilitator who was a survivor of sexual violence. I was so very uncertain about how to do this work. I think of how feminist scholarship, activism and therapy, and books such as The Courage to Heal workbook by Laura Davis, Discoveries by Sheridan Linnell and Dorothy Cora, and Father-Daughter Rape by Biff Ward offered us a path. This work and such books gifted us language, concepts and a program to start to respond meaningfully to men who had been sexually abused, a response that was so desperately overdue. Alongside these supporting histories for reclaiming lives from sexual violence, I found myself imagining my powerful appreciation and, frankly, relief if this book were available for us as we set off trying to find meaningful therapeutic responses to sexual violence towards boys and men all those years ago. There are two more images I wish to share. The first is an image of an act of justice doing, of a story and a book going out into the world and making a powerful difference to our field and for those who have been subjected to sexual violence. This is indeed a story, a life lived so far that has not been for nothing, but is making a powerful reclamation. There is one more image I have. I'm thinking of the words Dale imagined his father would share if he could comment on his journey. Dad would be sobbing, joy in knowing what he had achieved through what I shared, and hurt in realising how hard it all was. I find myself joining with Dale's father's sentiment. However, I would add that I see more joy than hurt being cultivated as a result of this book going out into the world. I know this book will offer companionship and ideas for workers who also, perhaps like me, desperately wish to offer meaningful response to sexual violence. and will offer sustenance and camaraderie for those who know something of the hurt and joy of their journeys in reclaiming their lives from sexual violence. So I wish Dale and Tim everything in this book going out into the world.
Thanks, David. That's a hard act to follow, isn't it? Before we commence, I would like to invite you to engage in what is considered in narrative therapy as an outsider witness. Some of you may be familiar with that idea. The idea is to invite you to consider these 4 categories of inquiry and how you're impacted by what has been shared tonight. Often we don't have the opportunity to hear the effects of how people's sharing has on our lives. And this activity will give you an opportunity to do so, and a practical takeaway as well. So as well, enable you hopefully to remain connected in the conversations that we'll have with the interview and the Q&A, and potentially having the space to reflect on how you have been moved by what has been shared tonight. Please, you're welcome to share these reflections when we have the Q&A, which will be later on tonight. As well, you can email your responses to us, especially if joining us online. So we'll make every effort to respond. So a bit about the book. Our book represents Dale and my walk together therapeutically for approximately 3.5 years. Our intention, as the image describes, is to stop the silence and stop the abuse. Moving towards justice doing, to coin a phrase by Vicky Reynolds, who some of you may be familiar with. Becoming political in the space of working with sexual violence was crucial. It was a place that Dale and I came to over time, which is important to acknowledge. And not taking away from Dale's individual experiences and minimising these effects, we came to this conclusion when Dale was able to reflect that his suffering wasn't for nothing. And the sexual abuse had a purpose to be able to share something with others. There was a higher purpose in all this.
This book cover, image and words, reveals Tim's and my story, the journey Tim and I have been on over the past 7 years. And it's amazing what has happened for me because of Tim's compassionate walking alongside. Tim's work awakened me to the way shame and guilt were powerfully controlling my life, keeping me silent for 42 years, which sadly is most of my life. Keeping me silent, our fight for justice, the way Tim worked reignited my integrity, and it was apparent our fight for justice was becoming political. I wanted to express myself in a different form, so I picked up a pencil and started to draw how I felt and what our journey was representing. I was angry, and I understood for the first time the most painful truths and fallout from the violent sexual abuse. I was carrying all of that in my body. I wanted some justice, desperately, to punch my way into that enormous balloon of justice, which seemed to be inaccessible. What I came up with on the front cover of the book is quite a powerful image for me. And I hope this image and the contents of the book are powerful in a way that brings every reader to new freedoms.
So, when Dale commenced experiencing freedom from shame and was able to punch his way into the enormous balloon of justice, Dale's integrity was being given voice. So for the audience, Dale, to give further context to that idea, what does that mean for you?
Thanks, Tim. So here I stand, fighting for justice, with distance from shame. My intention is to speak the truth. I now have the ability to share my story without shame silencing me. And I thank you, Tim, for that. So I'm right now fighting for justice for myself and others who've experienced childhood sexual violence. I would just love it if survivors could push through the barrier of shame. I don't want any survivor to live oppressed by shame, silent, covered in guilt and pain. Shame is powerful and it hangs heavily over, controlling so many lives. Sharing today, I want other survivors to realise that living life without shame is possible, even if momentarily. Also, enabling practitioners to see a way of working that centres on the relationship in all its interactions is so important. It certainly was for me. What I am noticing more of now, taking this position of speaking the truth, is that I have a voice and my integrity's at the forefront of what I'm doing today. My hard-won knowledge and the understanding of the way shame works opened a Pandora's box for me of deeply hidden experiences through the senses, flashbacks, and extraordinary nightmares, revealing the sexual violence, which I thought was my fault, and I was to blame. But in that, the truth, my innocence, was revealed, allowing me to break through shame, guilt, and 42 years of silence, lifting me out of the shame pit, enabling me to deal with the shit I've been covered in all those years. I've noticed that people are listening to me, and this is a bit difficult to say, but I've even been seen as an educator. This idea is so new for me, but Tim's work has awakened me to the fact that I am the expert in my own lived experiences.
Thanks, Dale. So, to give you all some context into the model of practice that I've used, that Dale and I have both got an understanding of now, narrative practice is based on a post-structural understanding that problems and struggles in life are socially and culturally constructed. This begins by externalising the problem so its meaning can be contested and its power practice is challenged. It can also involve a detailed analysis of the operations and effects of dominant discourses in people's lives. For instance, in context of the book and Dale's sharing, shame wasn't necessarily seen as an internalised state. Shame was also based on Dale's knowledge of knowing right from wrong and the effect of dominant masculinities in his life. For instance, men should fight violence with violence. Men can't share their feelings. Over time, Dale was able to resist the ways that he was positioned in these dominant discourses about masculinity and sexuality, and sought to reposition himself in a preferred way. What is also worth mentioning, which is highlighted in the book, is Dale's acts of resistance to the sexual abuse. A phrase coined by Angel Yuen from the work of Michael White, one of the founders of narrative therapy. People suffering from the ongoing effects of trauma often experience a diminished sense of agency. Yet, what Dale and I found was that it was possible to elicit a sense of agency with Dale and elicit descriptions and render meaning to Dale's subtle acts of resistance. These subtle acts, actions, thoughts, thinkings, are different from open opposition, retelling or fighting back, that are often less possible during the abuse. Dale's acts of resistance were also able to be seen as acts of survival in response to the abuse.
Justice doing is all about stopping the silence, stopping the abuse. The fist into the balloon enables this. That's why we're here today.
So now Dale and Tim will be interviewed by Alex Bowick from ABC Radio Alice Springs, who will delve more into their intentions behind the book and its humble beginnings.
Hi everyone, as you just said, my name's Alex. I'm from the local ABC radio. Just so you know, we're using the mics for the online feed, if you're wondering why you're not actually hearing a projection here. It's just such an absolute privilege to have a conversation with these guys tonight, with all of you. We did have a conversation on ABC radio earlier in the week, which I'm really thankful for. Your book is just so generous, it's so vulnerable, but it has so much strength to it. It's extraordinary, and I suspect it's going to be life-changing and life-freeing for a lot of people. So thank you and congratulations.
Thanks, Alex. I want to talk into the mic. Yeah, thanks, Alex.
I think a lot of people might want to know just a little bit more about how you actually came into one another's lives in the first place.
Yep, sure. Did you want to? Yep. So I was back in 2017. The Royal Commission into Institutional Child Sexual Abuse, I guess, was starting up, and or it had been going on for a number of months or a while then. And I was working in Central Victoria for a sexual assault agency, and through that and a number of hurdles that Dale had to jump through, he eventually got referred to me, didn't you, Dale? So, yeah.
And so you've walked together over this past 7 years in the counsellor-client relationship, and then also speaking at conferences. When you think back, did you ever actually think that you would write and publish a book together?
No. No, I didn't, Alex. I'm not well educated because of the bullying at school. It was a nightmare. So it's really surprising for me. But we have. It is quite emotional for me too that my book, my story, which has been locked away for over 42 years in silent brokenness, is now written in these pages. And I'm very grateful to you, mate, for that. Our story is now published in this book. As Tim walked alongside and supported me with care and compassion, using narrative therapy approaches, we realised our fight for justice was becoming political. But you know, from the start of Tim's and my journey, our work has been so well documented through the way Tim worked. The significant questions he asked and the way Tim used the whiteboard in our consults, sharing the note-taking on the whiteboard, which Tim always took a photo of and sent me the photo via email, and a new set of questions to think about for the next appointment. It was just amazing for me because that information, which was written on the whiteboard, had never left my body before. They were things I'd never even whispered to myself. But they were now outside of me, in this space that Tim provided for me, a safe space. So I wanted other people to have the opportunity to hear these profound happenings. A book was a great way to get our story out there, to try and help other people who had had similar experiences to me.
Thanks, Dale. And following on from that, I guess, into my context, I guess, like any conclusion that we come to in life, endpoint we finish at, if I had have thought that under the spire of the Catholic Church, looking through that window of the counselling room, that we'd be writing a book together, maybe I wouldn't have started that journey. And I guess the same goes for life, doesn't it, really? And I was dedicated to stopping the silence and sexual abuse, and I never imagined that it'd get to this where we'd be writing a book together.
Thanks, guys. Do you want to add something?
Yeah. Well, Alex, that spire was an overpowering image for me. It represented evil, and here it was overshadowing the window of the counselling room. It made me want to fight to get my story out there. but right then I had no idea how I would do that. I was in the middle of court appearances, and I knew so well the cold denial and rejection from the Catholic Church, who said many times they had no duty of care for me because I wasn't Catholic. Those words had the ability to destroy me. I just wanted to die. And my wife, who is very private with her emotions, sobbed loudly as they repeated those words over and over again. It made me want to fight for justice for all those people that had been harmed by pedophile priests. But yes, as Tim said, humour was there that first day in the counselling room. I made a joke about the spire that day. It was ironic. I'd say God has a sense of humour. But it did lighten the mood in the counselling room that day.
Yeah, what was that like for you, Tim? Meeting under the spire of the Catholic Church, was it sort of surreal?
Yeah, it was a little surreal, and I think I've reflected later with the manager of the agency, and we both sort of cringe at the fact of the spires. You look through the window, and it represents a lot of power. And I guess that stirred something in me to want to challenge that power and speak above the spire, which, I guess it renewed my faith that, this was something that we were meant to embark on, really. And humour in the face of adversity too. And I guess I was being vulnerable. It was a risk. Of showing a bit of humour in that, I guess, in the first session that we had. And, that risk is showing vulnerability. Again, I think that's so important in building a relationship of trust. And I guess that's quite important.
Tell us a bit about why the book's so important to both of you, and why it was that you wanted to make this journey together public and those conversations public.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. My experiences of going through the judicial process and the way I was treated by psychologists was like being abused over and over again. The shame coat was buttoned up around me, and I didn't think I'd survive. I didn't want other survivors to go through this. It's important to get my story out there, to try and make a difference for others. And I wanted psychologists, counsellors, social workers and mental health professionals to understand that survivors of childhood sexual violence need to be treated in a specialised way with care, compassion and vulnerability, and to understand and be invested in the survivor's life and outcomes. I wanted my voice to be heard. I wanted to stop the silence. The silencing effect is horrendous. It needs to stop.
Thanks, Dale. Is that okay for you? Yeah. It's twofold, I guess, for me. I guess within my role and the way Dale met, and me being new to sexual assault counselling, I guess I was struck by the space being still fairly dominated by forensically driven service models and looking at the problem stories, where the stories that I was hearing were just amazing acts of resistance, acts of survival, which I felt just needed to be shared and needed to be highlighted. And I also felt isolated in the way that I was working in that way. And I guess Dale gave me solidarity in the language that I used, and that recognition that if I had gone through similar circumstances, maybe I wouldn't be in the room, And I think it's just by chance that brought me there. So for the book, it's important to share that the reality of being vulnerable and forming that relationship is very important, key to the way that we worked, and I feel others work with others as well. And I guess I want to encourage other counsellors through the book, health practitioners, anyone really who finds themselves in a position of implied power, who feel challenged by dominant ways of practice, that interacting with others and for them to be inspired to back themselves in how they work, how they navigate those conversations they have. Even if that isn't supported by those around them, I got great solace through Dale. And building on what Dale's already shared, it's now about stopping the silencing nature of the abuse. And this is one way to put in text, to put the words, the language out there, to be viewed up. And I guess I see a responsibility of how can I shift conversations in a direction that acknowledge shame as an indication of value awareness. And that's a fairly key tenet, key area in the book that we do go through. So,
Thanks, guys. I wanted to also ask you about the title. It's called Reclaiming Lives from Sexual Violence, Understanding Shame Through Innovative Narrative Therapy. Can you tell me why you decided on that and what it represents?
For me, Alex, it represents our work together. It tells a story, the title, the front cover, and every word in the book. Our fight for justice. To stop the abuse, to stop the shame, to stop the silence. And again, to help people to start talking about their own stories, to reclaim their integrity and lives. That's the only way you can break into that justice, by sharing your own knowledge. It is really important for other practitioners to know how I was treated by professionals. It almost completely broke me. That's not acceptable. Thank God I met Tim, and I've been treated with respect, compassion, and Tim believed me. That's just so important for survivors to be believed. Reclaiming lives is rightfully assuming that I am a person. The abuse, though, has impacted me and continues to do so. Yet, there are other stories that inform who I am. I am not the problem. But that's how other professionals saw me, and led me to believe that I was filthy, lying scum, and that the abuse was my fault. Having a deep understanding of the way shame works was such a crucial part of me no longer taking on the abuse of the perpetrator as my fault. The way Tim worked through narrative therapy opened up so many possibilities for me that I absolutely needed to share them. So the book is paramount in enabling us to tell our story.
Well said, Dale. Thank you. And adding on to what Dale's already shared, is that reclaiming lives, as it implies, is that the person's positive identity construction conclusion about themselves, their values and beliefs that highlight who they are have not been forgotten, have not been lost. It's a matter of reclaiming that. And my role within the context of my walk with Dale was to render these stories of survival and acts of resistance more visible. I was influential in the conversation, but Dale was centred as the expert. And to thicken up, in a sense, my role is to identify these claims that had been silent for so long and silenced through shame. So therefore it became political in understanding where that shame was located. And another aspect of Dale and me working with innovation, which is highlighted in the book, is that shame Dale experienced, and many others I've had the privilege to walk alongside, was seen as an indication of value awareness, as I've already alluded to. So, for instance, to experience shame implies we know something different, doesn't it? We have strong value judgment on right from wrong and wanting to do no harm. And with Dale, him knowing the difference between a caring and hurtful relationship which was, for me, it was just powerful. To be able to still trust, to be able to still come into a space, me representing a male, and that was a skill, an ability of Dale's, which needed to be thickened up and acknowledged and honoured, wasn't it, Dale? And I guess narrative therapy is what it suggests. We all come with stories, and many of our stories we rarely pay attention to, which describe the richness of who we are, especially in therapy. And there's often these taken for granted stories of survival and resistance that are not heard. And our book assumes that we all have the capacity to make meaning of these experiences, and we don't often give ourselves the opportunity to do so. So placing the emphasis on the person within the lived experiences as the expert was so important, and in this case it's Dale.
Tim and Dale, thank you so much for sharing your story and speaking with us tonight. We do have a short Q&A session and Marty's going to explain how that will work.
So we're spot on with time. It's 7:15. So we now have time, 10 minutes for questions. Please bear in mind this forum isn't the stage for political commentary, and try and keep your questions brief. So I'll come around with a roving mic, and it's an opportunity to find out more about the book and Dale and Tim's journey. Does anyone have any questions? No? Okay. And
thank you. That was really personal and really fabulous. A couple of comments. One is that, Tim, I noticed when Dale was emotional, you put your arm on him. We all know the big rule, you never touch a client. We also know men don't look after each other emotionally. So seeing that level of physical caring was a sign of the genuineness of the work you've done together.
Yeah, thank you so much. I guess, that took time. Took trust, didn't it? For Dale to feel safe with that tenderness that I feel towards him, sharing in that emotions. And I think also that idea of being vulnerable is important, isn't it? I'm not immune to emotions because I'm in this context the therapist or the counsellor, and I don't need to be that bulletproof to that, to use, I guess, maybe a different analogy would be useful. But so I think it's important to show that. Yeah.
Okay,
definitely.
well, I've got two questions with that. You've used the terms acts of resistance many times.
Sure.
Which is a really important concept. I'd really like to hear what some of the acts of resistance are. But the other question is, Dale, in the interview, you said going to a man was really important. And I'm interested in your comments about, could a woman have done the same work with you, or was Tim's maleness a central part of the validation of who you were?
Strangely, I've seen many psychologists and counsellors over the years, and they were all female. And they were the ones that treated me so badly. Didn't believe me, accused me of being gay and all sorts of things, which was really painful. And I didn't really trust any of them. And so when an appointment was made for me to see Tim, I was really worried about seeing a male, because I didn't trust many besides my father and my brothers. But Tim was great. It was just so different, and I did crave male friendship, so because I didn't have any friends. And the ones that I did have before the abuse started were the worst at verbally abusing me, and so all that trust went. What was the other question about the acts of resistance? I guess when Ridsdale was abusing me, I resisted, and that made it worse for me. He became more violent and hurt me more, and I decided that I wouldn't resist him anymore, and I thought that was giving in to him, but Tim made me aware that that was an act of resistance, that I learnt to protect myself through doing that. So, yeah.
Thanks, Dale. This question might have been partly answered, actually, because you mentioned that you had seen counsellors and psychologists before Tim. What was the context of seeing? How did you end up seeing them? What was the context of seeing them? I guess everyone was kind of gasped that you were treated so badly. Perhaps it's not as uncommon as people hope, but what was the context in seeing them?
Yeah, I guess I had a lot of anxiety and depression and not coping very well, and I, been taking drugs, prescription drugs, alcohol, all sorts of things. I've tried to commit suicide, stuff like that. So I've been and seen many over the years, and and I never told them anything about the sexual abuse. So but I was still accused of being gay and stuff like that, which was really hurtful, and didn't know why. And one of the first appointment I had with this woman, she introduced herself and I introduced myself, and she said, "Are you gay?" was her first question. And I said, "Why would you even say that?" And she said, "Oh, just the way you spoke so quietly." And I never told her a thing, because I just thought, how can you, judge me by the way I spoke? That was just a really painful thing.
Not so much a question, just a gratitude for you sharing your story, and an acknowledgement of I'm a social worker as well, and just like an apology for those inexperienced social workers who perhaps try to find a way for something, a rationale for something that is so hurtful and personal that you've shared, and that could only be kind of rationalize that they've said those things in inexperience, I guess, and just how valuable you sharing your story is, and how powerful that will be for so many people in Alice Springs as well, and the world over, if they get to read your story. And just I hope that has kind of released you, and just how powerful it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hi there, thank you so much for sharing. Dale, did you want to, or were you compelled to, tell any of your stories within the Royal Commission into Institutional Abuse?
Yes, I did. Yep. And Tim supported me through that, so yeah.
Was that a painful experience?
Yes, it was. Yep.
And Tim was by your side?
He was, yep. Yeah.
And what was it like for you? Was it therapeutic, revealing, surprising to hear others' stories in that context?
I had a private session, so I didn't get to hear that, so other people's stories. Tim might be able to say how he felt through that process of hearing my story.
Yeah, if that's useful, I guess. It was humbling. It was humbling and a privilege to be journey and hearing the intimate detail of, as Dale was mentioning before, some things he hadn't uttered to himself before, which was suddenly in the open, and as best I could do is walk alongside that, and I think that was a political act in itself, wasn't it? Of speaking out about the abuse in a forum that wasn't within the four walls of counselling, which is quite a traditional way of doing it, and it took careful consideration, of course, to get to that stage where I was invited in to Dale's life in more detail. So for me, it was many layers to it, though, as you can imagine.
One more question. Have we got one? Or a comment?
Wow, what an amazing forum and open and candid conversation we've had tonight. It's actually talking about really the essence of, I guess, for me, social work, but also social justice. And it's so important that we do find a voice and to speak up. Often we feel afraid being a little person speaking up in a big complex society, but I think tonight's clearly demonstrated it's so important, it's vital to have these types of conversations. So just to thank people behind tonight for their contributions to making this event possible. Firstly, Dale and Tim. So maybe and then Olive Pink for providing this space as part of their service to the community. Around the corner, some of you, or all of you may know, there's a donation box at the entrance to the cafe, which I'd like to invite people to donate. Also Alex from ABC Radio Alice Springs for interviewing Tim and Dale and being so encouraging of their book and being so generous with her time. Gavin over here on my left from Alice Springs Baptist Church for providing the tech tools and video streaming equipment, as well as providing his time and energy tonight to making things happen so seamlessly. Next. Also over here, thank you to Bronwyn and her team at Red Kangaroo Books for promoting the event and being present tonight. At the end of tonight's book launch, you're invited to purchase a book from Bronwyn. She's offering 10% discount off the recommended retail price. She's accepting the My Alice voucher, so I believe it brings the book down to, is it $30-something, $35, $37? And also Tim and Dale will be happy to sign all the books. Also Tammy for her graciousness in providing food and refreshments for this event and her enthusiasm to support what we all have achieved tonight. For St Philip's College in Alice Springs for supporting the event's catering. And finally, thank you for joining us tonight at Olive Pink and online. So thank you.